Hey, thanks for joining us back here on episode 12, part 2 of our very special episode with our guest, Sarah Spangler. She is joining us today to talk with us about applying human experience within an organization and specifically applying that to a professional development opportunity. So we are super excited to have you join us today. Stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention in education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Sarah Spangler, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com, and I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
All right, welcome back. We're still with Sarah Spangler. So grateful she's joining us. We talked last episode just about some reminiscing, really. I mean, we can get on telling stories, but to kind of sum that up and to hear more about what you're doing, you know, the success we were having for what we were doing was not just emotional. It wasn't just one of those, we feel like it's making a difference. We made a difference, and we improved student persistence in their first course. We improved reduced, I should say, the number of students permanently withdrawing from the institution. And we did that by really soliciting the input of those we were working with. And people started to connect with each other, and they started to share ideas and innovate in their own role. Mm-hmm. And there we made history in what we were doing. And I think that's worth noting. You know, you don't reduce student permanent withdrawals by almost 27% in 18 months by a team of 5, mm-hmm. right? We did it with a movement, and we had a movement going of community, and it was working. So really enjoyed mm-hmm. catching up, but mm-hmm. really want to talk about how do you use that now? What are you doing? So I don't know, Erika, where you want to go?
Yeah, I'm curious. So we talked a lot about the origin story and how the work that you did at the institution together. What has been kind of one of the most, maybe a consistent thing or something that you've taken from those experiences and brought over to your new role doing professional development? What great
influenced you? Great question. So actually it's kind of builds a little bit off of what Adam just said about getting people's input and perspective and things start happening. So I would say what I try to weave, like what we learned and what we stumbled upon, I stumbled upon. So here we're having these workshops, and I was looking for new and creative ways to get people to brainstorm. So I stumble upon the concept of design thinking, which you're listening to this, you may or may not have heard of that. And if you've experienced it all, you've probably experienced it in the form of like a workshop, a design sprint, a solution sprint, something that was an experience that you went through, and there was Post-it notes and markers and all the things, right, to get all the ideas out on the table. And that is design thinking, and that's what we started practicing. However, the actual elements of design thinking is really about a mindset, and the mindset is applicable all the time, everywhere, and it makes the biggest difference no matter what you're doing. And so now in this role that I'm directing the development and engagement for an organization, I find that if I just approach everything with this design thinking mindset, it changes everything. And so here, let me just explain this a little bit. So let's say, Erika, you're in a leadership position, and it comes to your attention that a document in some sort of process, the document needs changed. Like something's not working with the document. Someone said, hey, we got to fix this. And you have the power to do that. It's in your realm. And so you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, I think I see what's wrong with this. and you make the adjustment. You kind of rework this workflow for this for whatever's happening in your company, and you send out the email to everyone involved and say, "Hey, I've updated the document. Here's the thing. Put this into place." And that's okay. That's how we do business.
It happens
right?
every day.
Happens every day. and so but that's not design thinking. That's just how we do business. Design thinking mindset would be Erika's got, this comes to her attention and she says, okay, so this document affects 3 different departments. I'm just going to go talk to a few people real quick. I'm going to talk to one frontline person in each department and ask them, like, what is it about this that isn't working for you? And you, in the midst of those conversations, discover it's actually not that document that's the problem. It's the document before that one that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And here's why. And then after talking to all 3 departments, you realize, it's kind of a couple levels. It's not just that. It's where you find the document. It's in the wrong file, all these things. So you put all the pieces together. And in those conversations, you also ask those people, okay, well, do you have any thoughts or ideas on how we can adjust this to make it work better? And,
right.
One person gets out this big, I do. I have like 10, I've been working on this. They've got all these ideas, and someone might not have a lot of ideas, but they are so grateful you ask the questions. So they give you their perspective. And so now Erika goes back to her desk and she's thinking, okay, I've got all this information. I've got some good ideas. I'm going to put this together. It's worth trying this, right? So the email goes out to all those involved and it says, hey, this came to my attention that this is not working. I talked to a few people. Here's some things that we've come up with. We're going to try this for 6 months, see how it goes. I want your feedback, because if it's not working, we would need to make some adjustments. That's design thinking. It's 4 steps. It's empathy, which is really just gathering perspective. It's gathering other people's perspectives. The second step is define the problem. What is actually the problem here? Like, is it document 1, document 2? Is it someone's personality? I mean, it could be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And then ideating solutions, which really comes down to giving people permission to share their ideas. Mm-hmm. And then prototyping, which means you're not going for perfection.
My favorite.
You're not trying to get it right. You're just trying to get something worth trying. Mm-hmm. And the try means it's going to change again, and telling everyone that's what we're doing. We're going to try this and it might change again. So Erika, I have a question for you now after I went through all that. So you're the leader. And so scenario 1, what are the pros to that? Like, what are the benefits to scenario 1 where you just achieved it, you got it done, it's out?
Yeah. I mean, there's a control element to that, right? It's just, I made the change. I got it done. I sent it out. It's done. And that is a much faster process than the one that you just described.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. It's so speedy.
Yeah.
And then, the cons to scenario 1, I don't know. You could guess what some of those cons might be.
Well, you mentioned that maybe you find out it wasn't that document. It was actually the second document, or someone in particular has, so you miss out on finding out about those different opportunities. So the change that you implement quickly doesn't actually fix anything.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So it's this.
That's no good.
Right. It's this, one takes time and ego. Like, you got to lay down your ego, right? The other one, is fast. And so you've got these, like, you got to weigh as a leader, you got to weigh where do I want to give up here and what I want to gain? And a lot of times in the work that I'm doing, what I want to gain is everybody feeling like they belong, that they are valued, that they are heard, that their input is important. They have permission to have ideas. They have permission to connect with one another. And when in the future they see a problem, they now know the culture of solving the problem. And the culture of solving the problem is involve other people, get other people's perspective, don't operate in a vacuum. And so I know that might seem far from professional development and engagement, but it's just not at all. Well, to me, it is professional development and engagement.
Yeah. And it's the idea in both scenarios, you may have to do something else, right? Scenario 1, you get it done efficiently. It didn't work. We got to try something else. in scenario 2, same things possible, but the difference is in scenario 1, you're likely having to do something else because you weren't on the right thing.
Yeah.
In scenario 2, right, when you involve other people, sure, we're going to have to try 3, 4, 5 things, but at least we're on the right issue.
Yeah.
And that is a big difference because employees start to wear out and like, oh my gosh, they don't know anything. We hear that a lot. My bosses are idiots, they don't know anything. And what they're really saying is they're not asking me.
Yeah.
And I do this every day.
Yeah.
They
Doing
just
things that
assume
affect
they
their
know.
jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, it makes me think of this phrase that I've heard Adam use when he works in the consulting role, is that slow is fast and fast is slow. Design thinking does slow things down at first because think of all the time that took, right? But in the end, the speed that you get later, because the entire staff has learned how to operate with each other instead of fighting, against each other. That speed, you gotta put the work in to get there. And scenario 1 is fast is slow. That it's faster for me to fix the document on my own, but slows down everything because you actually didn't fix the right thing anyways.
Have you ever refurbished furniture? Like, this is such a good analogy that makes me think.
Yes, I have.
Because I have too, and you can do the quick and dirty way and just slap on some of that chalk paint, but there is a lot of maintenance down the road, or you don't do all the priming and the sanding and the stripping and all of the prep work. That's really, so there's more time. You choose more time up front to really do it right and get a good quality paint job, or you do it quick and fast and you're unhappy with the results 6 months later.
One CEO that I've worked with calls it front loading. He's like, we're going to front load the process so that it's better later.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a good way to look at it. It's a great example, honestly.
Oh my God. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, we're priming the dresser right now. It's taken forever, but it's going to pay off down the road.
So you're not...
That was a really long answer to your question, by the way.
You're not renovating furniture.
No.
Tell us what you're doing now. You're still in education, which is awesome. But what are you doing now?
Yeah. So I work for an organization that runs and operates alternative high schools and dropout recovery programs in the state of Arizona. And it's really cool work. It's hard work. The staff, the mentors, the teachers that pour into these high school kids, they have giant hearts and they have the potential for burnout. They really, if you're in an alternative high school or especially a dropout recovery program, hence the name, it's because you've dropped out of high school, usually because hard life has happened to you. And so to help them get back into school and to push through their program and get to that goal of earning a high school diploma, that's hard work. And so they are pouring into these kids. The staff are pouring into the students in every possible way that you can imagine. It's not just academic. And we talk about this a little bit. In some ways, the academic is their Trojan horse because it gets kids in the door where they can actually, teach them life skills and structure and give them a common adult who they can trust and all those things. Like, this is happening. This is really good work. Well, that saying that you cannot give that which you first don't possess, I mean, that's huge for these mentors and teachers. How are they supposed to pour into these students if nobody's pouring into them? I wasn't supposed. You didn't tell me that we could cry on this podcast.
Are you crying?
A little bit. Okay,
There's
so
no
I was going to
crying in podcasts.
Oh, this is terrible. So it's all about. So my role, which is super fulfilling, is figuring out what is it that they need poured into them. And so, back to this design thinking thing is that. The only way to know what is it that they need in order to feel full and have something to give is to ask them. So I started my work there by having one-on-ones with absolutely every staff person, all the way up to the owners, and asking them the questions of, how do you want to grow? What do you need? What do you feel successful? Do how tired are you? All the things to get them to tell me, what is it? And, sometimes they answer the questions literally and very directly. But then as you get to talking to them, you hear some undertones of things that they need. They just don't know how to say it, don't know how to articulate it. So, so I did that. That was the slow is fast part, right? The slow part at the beginning was gathering all that and then processing it to determine what are my next steps, because I want to bring something to them that will be valuable and appreciated and not feel like homework and not feel like a box to check. And a lot of times, if you don't know anything about K-12 education, which I'm sure a lot of you do because of our audience, but in K-12 education, professional development, a lot of times is a checkbox. You have to do it. You have to do it to be certified. And I watched that virtual thing and I did my time, right? That is not the intent at all in the work that I'm doing. If I could have no boxes to check, that would be my preference. But we are, because we need to do that for to keep the state happy, and I'm okay with that. But it should never feel that way. It should always feel like, gosh, I didn't realize my employer cared that much, right? Like that's how it should feel. So it's just designing uniquely custom programs for what their needs are. And I came with nothing prepackaged. So,
right.
And I had no experience in K-12, so that benefited me. I didn't even.
It was easy to play dumb.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Some of the things they were asking for too, I was like, I don't even know what that is. So, I'd have to find experts for that. And I will, if it seems like that's what most people need. But it turns out, and we are learning some things. The program that I've rolled out is kind of like a little mini conference that happens 4 times a year to get all of the employees together in the same space, because they work at like 6 or 7 different locations. Get everyone together in the same space 4 times a year and have this little mini conference where they're learning some things that they signed up for. Yeah, I want to learn about that. I want to learn about children in poverty. I want to learn some Spanish basics, and or I want to read a book for self-development, right? They choose these paths. And then we do some other things that just feel like clarity, and like the town hall moment where everyone's getting the same visionary information at the same time. Yeah. We pull in students from the past to talk about what they're doing now. So there's some inspiration, some motivation to keep going. So there's all these things. And so it feels like a program, and it's organized, and it has a brochure. It's got something to look at. But what I'm really doing, and what I've really found is happening, is exactly what we were just talking about in this scenario 2 situation, is that they're learning how to work together. They're learning how to trust each other, how to go to each other when they need poured into. Because, by the way, I can't do that by myself. Right. Then I would be a pile of, I'd be melted on the floor myself. So it's about teaching them to gain what they need from each other, from resources, trust each other, laugh with each other, and learn with each other. And a lot of these sessions are being taught by them. So they're being the expert. They're sharing their own best practices and knowledge. So it's becoming a community. And in the community is where they are developing professionally and growing personally.
So to jump in here and in part support what the work you're doing with some data, and then of course to make a shameless plug for 240 Solutions at the same time. Being a partner of Elevated Education, which is where you are, we're measuring the human experience, and we've talked a little bit about that. We've not spent a lot of time talking about the tools that we use, because this podcast is not about 240 Solutions, but we're measuring that human experience along the way. And last year, about this time is November, the leaders of Elevated Education said, we want to see that experience, that human experience, improve by 10 percentage points. That is a lofty goal. I'm telling you, that's a big one. And they were committed to the work. Sarah had been brought on already, so that was one addition. There were other additions and other changes they were making, but they were applying these concepts that we've been talking about across now, 10, 11 episodes. They were applying them. And I am almost certain that when we rerun that here in just a few weeks, that we're going to see that, because already at the midpoint, they've made up over half that distance because of the commitment that they've had. And so this idea that we're focused on community, it can feel really mushy gushy. Oh, I just feel better about myself. I can sleep better at night. No, it's working. It's working. The institution or organization, I should say, in this case, is growing significantly.
Right.
And they're making sure that their folks have to give what the students need. And so I want to make a shameless plug here for 240, because you talked about, you had the opportunity where they brought you in and said, however you see fit.
Yeah.
Not every organization has the financial means to do that, the capacity to do that. That's where an organization like 240 Solutions can come in. We're skilled at doing this and going in and connecting with every team member and having conversations with them that will help us give you a better understanding of what strategies will really work in moving the needle for the human experience, so that then that can work in moving the needle towards profitability and productivity and customer outcomes or student outcomes, whatever the case is in your organization. And I think that's worth noting, because some may be listening to this and going, that's great. We don't have that person. And HR teams, which is traditionally where we see these things sit, they're overloaded. They're at capacity at times. And so that's where we get the opportunity to act as a fractional employee engagement department and to really come alongside and help.
Right.
And so to be able to watch you do this has been really, really incredible. So can you talk a little bit about specifically the human experience, belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose, and how you're using that in the creation? I mean, you kind of flashed the pamphlet. That pamphlet's irrelevant to all of you, but you talked about your program, but you use these things, belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose, in its development. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how it came out?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things that maybe I've done subconsciously and have never really thought through how to articulate it. And I didn't prepare for this question, so I'm just going to kind of like wing it here. So first of all, I know that there's been a lot of talk on belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose. And in my mind, I kind of translate that into words that really resonate with me. And so belonging really is belonging, but in essence, it's feeling safe and feeling like I can be me, which you guys talked about this recently, that I can be myself, but also I have a future here. Vulnerability to me is really just about the level of risk that a person is willing to take. And so when I think of risk, I think of innovation. And so if it's an innovative company, there's a high level of vulnerability, because to be innovative, you're constantly taking risks. You're throwing out ideas that could be awful or trying things that could fail. So is this an innovative culture? Is it a culture where people talk about their future? Or do I hear a lot of comments, which I will say happen more often than I would like, where people say, I just don't want to lose my job. I don't want to get fired. When you hear that, you realize they're operating off of this idea of I might lose something, instead of operating off this idea of I can't wait for what's next. And that changes everything in a person's brain, right? So, and then shared purpose. And shared purpose is a little bit about clarity of knowing the direction, but a bit about feeling like you are a part of it, that you are an integral piece of the direction that this is going. So when I created anything, and hopefully as I create more to come for the organization, are those things happening? So are people learning I do have a future here, and I'm safe to be myself in this? And yeah, I think so. Like, why would we do this if we didn't want to build your future with the company? And why would I ask specifically what you want for your professional development if I don't intend to keep you a long time? Taking risks, I mean, maybe they're learning that from me, because I'm like constantly doing things that whether go bad or go well. And I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. So yeah, our other people coming to me and saying, hey, I have an idea. And they are. And it shows up in this as well, because they'll say, hey, I experienced that session. I have an idea for another one. Mm-hmm. And then I'll say, would you like to lead that? Yes, I'd love to lead that. That's a high vulnerability to not only have an idea, but be willing to lead it. So there's that piece. It gives opportunity for that. And yeah. What was your question?
Yeah. Do you find in those moments, you talked about going to people and kind of asking those questions of, what would you like to see? What are you experiencing? What's your perspective? Do you find that either you yourself or just the organization is surprised by the people who step up and ask those questions, and because that would be an amazing development opportunity as well. How do you know that you have a leader sitting there who might just be siloed and doing their thing day in and day out, but has great ideas and great. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. Yes. And without, using names, there are, as soon as they feel safe that they can come to me, because they realize like my questions are about you and for you, not to like figure out, do you fit here or not? Like that's not the reason I'm asking my questions. They come out of the woodwork and they will say, hey, I'm thinking of going and getting my doctorate or my master's in educational leadership because I want to be an administrator. And you're thinking, you do? Really? Like, I don't know that anyone would have guessed that, but that's awesome. Let me support you in that. When maybe in a different culture, in a different environment, they're going to do that and not tell anyone because what they're doing is planning to leave. Right. That's so different and so cool that they're willing to share, like, I'm going to do this. Will you support me? And by the way, I want to stay. And here's what I want to do. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. But yeah, good question for sure.
So we are running out of time. We got about 7 minutes. Okay. But I think you said you're basically hosting a mini conference.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to be there for the kickoff, and it is incredible. I'm so impressed with what you're doing there. But just that alone, thinking about the human side, everybody loves a conference, right? It's a day with coworkers typically. You're often challenged, inspired, educated, informed. All of those things happen at a conference, and really what you've put together is that. But what I love most about what you've done is you did ask all of those questions, and then after the kickoff, you then went back to them and said, would you like to do a session on this? Because it's a thing that they were interested in. And having the opportunity to witness that and watch these employees engage and be the experts on some of these topics. And they're not all in leadership positions. You've got frontline people, some that have only been there less than 6 months.
Absolutely.
Leading sessions. And I think that's so incredible because you put your money where your mouth is, kind of, right? It's, let me ask you, but then let me turn around and value you by saying, you want to do this?
Yeah.
And then helping them get there. Why did you decide on the conference? I mean, you've got 400 or 1, 2, 3, and 400 levels.
Yeah.
You've got a structure to this thing that I think is interesting, but why'd you land there?
Well, I didn't start there. Last year, I did try some other things with this group, and they weren't great. I tried to do some virtual professional development because everyone's spread out. I wanted everyone to have the same opportunity, and so of course you go to virtual. And it was okay, but it wasn't amazing. And we did some town halls. Again, we did it in a way that unfortunately not everyone could attend because everyone's schedules are different, and so that wasn't amazing either. And so I did some trial and error. I did some in-person things too, but just with small groups. And I mean, if you are listening to this and you participated in those, I don't think anyone would say that they were the worst thing they'd ever experienced, but they just weren't brilliant, right? They weren't amazing.
It wasn't right.
It wasn't quite right.
It was easy.
It was easy.
But it wasn't quite right.
Yeah. So, it's all about agility and making those little adjustments. And so as I started to think through what does this organization really, really need? Well, they need to step away from their desk. Mm-hmm. They don't need to be in front of their computer. They need to be out of their space, and they need to be with people. And I actually think that is true for all humans. Like, that is kind of how I roll. But it takes a minute to feel like you have permission to do that in an environment where it's not easy.
Yeah.
It takes some time. It took approval from the owners, and it took a budget, and it took a lot of logistics, to be honest, because some people have to fly in, and some people have to stay in hotels, and they need cars, and there's mileage, and it's tricky, but it's worth it. So it's always worth it to put people in the same space, as long as you're not going to do talking heads. Don't put people in the same space and do talking heads.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring them all that way, by golly, have them interact and collaborate with each other. That's what they're there for. They have so much to offer. Don't waste that on trying to fill their head with too much. They can't absorb all that. You can do a lot, but you can't absorb all that new information. So, I can go on and on.
And that benefit of coming together and those relationships that are formed and those conversations that happen like that. I mean, I know for myself, that fuels motivation and inspiration and all the good feelings for months. Yes. that trickles out for a long time. And I'm sure those people went back to their workstations, went back to their offices, and are chatting the people that they met, and are having different conversations and different interactions than they had prior to attending that. So good work. I mean, kudos to you, and just the work you do is important. And it's fun. Thank you for
if you
caring.
Ask, and hopefully if you ask me next year what it looks like, it looks different, because staying the same is not going forward. So it'll keep evolving.
Yeah.
It's been great having you join us, and
thanks for having me.
So much of what we've been talking about, but that you and I really spent the time to kind of, how do we explain this to people? Understanding the human experience. Why does it matter? To be able to give us a real world example of how you're using that. First guest of hopefully many to follow that are deploying this kind of mentality. It really has been great to catch up with you and to hear you share from your perspective.
Thanks for having me. It's been super fun.
I have one final question.
Okay.
And we might be over time, but I'm gonna be a rebel and go rogue here. So we talk a lot about, we want to make sure that our audience has a very practical takeaway that they can have. So my question to you is, what advice would you give somebody who wants to take that initiative, start to, implement something similar within their organization? What practical advice would you give them?
Yeah, I'd say start small. Start with kind of that thing I led out with, scenario A and B. Be the person who's willing to try this kind of design thinking mindset with the small things, and go from there. Maybe you're not in a position to do like a workshop or a mini conference yet, and that's okay. But the next time you are fixing a document, fixing a process, especially if you're in leadership, just stop for a minute and think, what were those steps again? Like, I could talk to people, figure out what the real problem is, get some ideas, try something. Try that a few times and just see what happens. And don't do anything else until you see what happens, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Great advice.
I will say it's been really good. I want to reiterate something that we're hearing just for leaders, that it's easy to say that your people are your greatest asset. It's also really easy to treat them like assets. And what you're talking about is saying, let's not do that. Let's treat them like people. Let's invite them to the conversation. Let's find out how they perceive a particular thing, what they need. And it's such a simple thing. So thank you for encouraging us. And if you're leading, take the challenge and start small. Don't overthink it. And of course, if you want more insight and have questions, you can always reach out to us at 240solutions.com. We'd be more than happy to have those conversations with you. But Erika, we're 3/4 of the way through, and this one might have been my favorite.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.